So Kim, what's on your radar?
Well, for the past couple of days, we've been hearing about what some are calling explosive bombshell testimony from the so-called Facebook whistleblower, Frances Haugen. And I say so-called because she really didn't tell us anything we didn't already know. She said Facebook makes company decisions that benefit the company more than they benefit society. I mean, is that supposed to be some sort of a surprise? I think that's the MO of every company. Here's Haugen revealing how Facebook uses algorithms to amplify certain content over others.
Engagement-based ranking and these processes of amplification, they impact all users of Facebook. The algorithms are very smart in the sense that they latch on to things that people want to continue to engage with. And unfortunately, in the case of teen girls and things like self-harm, they develop these feedback cycles where children are using Instagram as to self-soothe, but then are exposed to more and more content that makes them hate themselves.
So basically, if you search for healthy recipes once, each time you log in, you'll see more healthy recipes, even when you're not looking for them. And on top of this, and what Haugen sounded the alarm loudest on, is when you log in, you'll see other related content you didn't even search for, like maybe weight loss remedies or maybe even surgical options. But again, this isn't unknown information. Many of us have figured this out already. She also said Facebook removes safeguards over content once certain events like elections are over. Basically, they lift restrictions on content deemed hateful, harmful, or misinformation as the definitions of what is considered hateful, harmful, or misinformation change, which seems to be all the time.
Do you think that Facebook turned off the safeguards because they were costing the company money, because it was reducing profits?
Facebook has been emphasizing a false choice. They've said the safeguards that were in place before the election implicated free speech. The choices that were happening on the platform were really about how reactive and twitchy was the platform, right? Like how viral was the platform. And Facebook changed those safety defaults in the run-up to the election because they knew they were dangerous. And because they wanted that growth back, they wanted the acceleration of the platform back after the election, they returned to their original defaults.
But this part of her testimony was the most problematic. She says the reason Facebook claims they removed the safeguards were because they were an infringement on free speech, which they are. Facebook nor the government nor Haugen herself should be the ones to decide what is misinformation, hateful, or harmful speech, because these labels are usually in the eyes of the beholder and which side of the aisle the beholder happens to be on. Facebook and other big tech platforms have a history of censoring even truthful information if that information harms the candidate they favor, such as in the case of the Hunter Biden story, which reportedly Haugen was a member of the 200-person team at Facebook that censored that story. But besides the fact there wasn't really any new information dished out by this whistleblower, both liberal and conservative media, as well as Democrats and Republicans in Congress, are taking this moment to rehash what should be done about big, bad, powerful social media. Conservatives are screaming about the apparent harms Instagram has on teen girls when they go to the platform and see an endless stream of perfectly thin, toned, airbrushed, and surgically enhanced bodies. Liberals are screaming about the content they consider hateful and misinformation. Both now want to control the platforms to do something to keep society safe. Frances Haugen had a couple of recommendations about what to do. She suggests more government oversight of the platforms to rein in on certain content and reforming Section 230 to cancel immunity for algorithmic amplification. So let's start with the government oversight. Unless the oversight is to ensure free legal speech for all, government oversight would mean users would only see content which is government sanctioned. And once again, neither the government nor big tech employees should be the arbitrators of truth and information. What my crazy Uncle Mike posts on Facebook should not be shielded from me when I'm likely to see him at a family picnic and get an earful anyway. Posts made by someone who I choose to follow on social media should not be censored from my feed simply because the powers that be don't like the information they are sharing with me. I chose to follow that person. It shouldn't be up to them. But if Congress pressures big tech to censor, they will have to censor in a way that the government approves of. And I don't think I need to explain why that is problematic unless you're someone who just blindly trusts everything the government says and does. Now, as far as the harm Instagram does to teen girls' self-esteem, this is an issue that goes back to magazines, supermodels, movies, and music videos. Teen girls have always compared themselves to others. And yes, I can see how Instagram, with all of its filters and third-party apps that can airbrush and make waistlines smaller, are problematic. But it's a similar problem that was tackled when overly airbrushed, rail-thin supermodels graced the cover of Cosmo. Public pressure demanded reform, and that public pressure is the best way to counter and control this. I'm not sure it requires an act of Congress. Haugen suggests reforming Section 230. Many others are calling for an outright repeal of the law, and it's one of those things that both sides of the aisle seem to be on board with, but for different reasons. Now, Section 230 gives tech platforms immunity from liability for things you and I post online. They can't be held accountable for the crazy things Uncle Mike might post, or they'd have to review every single post before it's visible to the public. Section 230 was created to help tech platforms maintain an open and free space for the public without being held accountable for what the public uses their platform for. So imagine telephone companies being held liable for someone saying something racist, or even plotting a murder over their telephone lines. If they were held accountable, they would start listening in to all of our calls to ensure we aren't using their services for a sinister purpose. I mean, imagine a telephone company suspecting you might use the phone for nefarious reasons, and so they cut your service or prevent you from dialing certain numbers. Now, the left wants to do away with Section 230 in order to pressure the tech companies to moderate all of the content, to limit people from sharing information they think is hateful, harmful, or misinformation, which also includes everything they don't morally or politically agree with. The right wants to do away with Section 230 because they say the statute is supposed to keep the internet open and free, and since big tech is moderating content, they shouldn't be given any protections. They say they should be held liable. No matter the reason you want to repeal Section 230, the end result is the same. If the statute is removed, tech companies would immediately have to moderate every single one of our posts. That would be a huge undertaking that would likely result in the removal of many accounts or very sophisticated AI that moderates every single post, video, podcast, and image before it's published. It would be similar to telephone companies needing to monitor our every call and text. Only the extremely large companies would be able to handle this sort of undertaking, which might be why Facebook is for reforming the statute. It would basically eliminate smaller competitors. There's simply no way a small company could moderate every single post. Now, one thing I do agree with Haugen on is algorithmic amplification being a problem. There is a case to be made that big tech shouldn't have immunity from liability for the unwanted content they throw at us. It's one thing to use a platform to follow people, friend people, and conduct searches of things we want to see. It's another thing to be fed a stream of content we didn't ask for. It's similar to being harassed by telemarketers. And maybe just like how we've had ways of opting out of telemarketing calls, maybe there should be a way to opt out of algorithmic suggestions based on user habits. Though I don't agree with why Haugen wants to rein in on algorithmic amplification, she cites public safety, which is always the excuse used to infringe on our freedoms and whittle away at our rights. I agree that it should be separated or limited from the basic functions of the platform, which is to connect to one another and share with one another. But what we choose to say or share, and whether or not others share it as well, should be up to us, not up to big tech moderators, the government, or even algorithms. So I'm curious, from your take, Robbie, as a libertarian, on Section 230, do you think it should be done away with? I mean, we're seeing both sides of the aisle say, let's reform it or let's get rid of it. I mean, what do you think of that?
I agree with almost everything you said in your radar. We absolutely should not get rid of it. The consequence of getting rid of Section 230 would be to force, the companies to do moderation that, just like you said, that in many cases they're simply unable to do. Can you imagine if YouTube? There's no AI that exists that could check YouTube videos. There's too many hours of content before they go online. So I think that was the very worst fix big tech idea that anyone has ever had. On the algorithms, I'll just say, there is an extent to which the companies have to use algorithms. So with Twitter, you can change to a mode where you just get every single tweet from everyone you follow in like chronological order of when it was posted. And I've yet to meet anyone who prefers this method of looking at Twitter. the method, the Twitter feed where they're doing some kind of curation to suggest things to you they think pieces of content you're more interested in based on what you've checked out recently, it has problems, but it's still better. So I don't know. It seems to me a difficult problem to solve. Obviously, some of these algorithms do a better job sometimes, and then they do a worse job. Maybe Facebook has tweaked it in a wrong direction and should go back. Other Google, et cetera, but it's just a difficult problem to solve because not having any kind of platform done curation or suggestion is not really an improvement, I think.
I'm curious, Ryan, do you think that there's anything that's going to come from this whistleblower testimony, or is it just going to be another one of those, news cycles where we hear the testimony from the whistleblower and then, the lobbyists step in for big tech and nothing really happens? Or do you think this is actually going to motivate a change?
Well, yeah, I mean, this morning, the Senate Judiciary Committee is hearing testimony from Jonathan Cantor, who is nominated to be the Assistant Attorney General for Antitrust for the Department of Justice. I think that I think he was already likely to get confirmed. I actually spoke with Ted Cruz yesterday, and he said he had just spoken with Cantor and had a really encouraging conversation with him. So if you can get Cruz on board, we'll see how the hearing goes today. If you can get Cruz on board, you're going to cruise through your nomination, your confirmation vote on the floor. And I think that this whistleblowers, I don't want to call them necessarily revelations, but the whistleblower being in the public certainly, I think, gives more grist to people like Lena Khan at the FTC or Cantor at DOJ, more political capital to go after these big tech companies. So I do think the window is open for some serious confrontation.
Well, and you mentioned Ted Cruz, and he's one that's out there calling for more censorship, which I'm totally against in this instance, but he is calling for more censorship under the guise of protecting children. And it's always one or the other. It's, we've got domestic terrorists and or other types of terrorism, right? We need public safety. Or
we
children.
need free speech. Not that free speech. Yeah, you hear this time and time again. Yep.
Yeah, and it's always children or it's terrorism. Yep. It seems to be one of the two all the time. And that's why, we've got Democrats right now saying, well, we need the censorship because all of these extremists are online, these, white domestic terrorists. And then you've got now Ted Cruz types on the Republican side saying, well, we've got to keep children safe. And it's just like, it's the same with what we talked about a couple of weeks ago with China coming in and now they're limiting how many video games kids can play, right? They're saying, you can only play video games for so many hours a day and only on the weekends now. And it's almost like we're calling for these sorts of controls. And it's like, why don't you just manage your own kids and take their phones away so that they're not sitting there looking at Instagram all day?
They're bashing China and then calling for exactly the same source of controls. Yep.
Yeah.
Very good point.
So it's really alarming to me. I really hope that if there's any reform done to Section 230, it's to hold the big tech companies accountable, is to say you have Section 230 protections. You need to stop this moderation, censorship, and the algorithmic amplifications onto people that they don't opt in on. I mean, I'm for the opting in, but we'll see how this pans out. But I am really worried about our free speech protections in this country.
Great points. We'll have more Rising right after this.